Some of the most iconic chicken dishes in America were never carefully planned. They were accidents, improvisations, or reactions to very specific situations. Hot honey fried chicken, for example, didn't come out of a corporate test kitchen. It started with a Brooklyn beekeeper casually drizzling chili-infused honey over food around 2010.
Wow,
There was
so
no
cool.
strategy
Really
behind
good.
it, no intention to create a national trend. But the combination worked so well, sweet first, then heat, that by the mid-2020s, it had become one of the most requested flavors across fast food chains in the United States. Buffalo wings followed a similar
Runner,
path.
I need this
In
upstate now.
1964, the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, New York, received a
Bird
mistaken
behind you with
delivery
the
of
fries.
chicken wings instead of the
Yo,
parts
I'm
they had
serious. This is the
ordered.
best chicken in
Rather
Brooklyn.
than
It
waste
really
them,
is. They got
Teresa
sauce
Bellissimo fried
everywhere.
the wings and coated them in
Don't
hot
everybody
sauce and
repeat it.
butter. That decision, made out of convenience, created an entirely new category of American food that now generates billions in annual
Order
sales.
72.
The
The hot
same pattern
McChicken
appears with
combo is
popcorn
ready
chicken.
on the side.
KFC introduced it in 1992 as a way to use irregular
All right, here's
leftover
your order.
pieces
Have a
of
good one.
chicken that
Thanks, you
didn't
too.
fit standard cuts. By making them bite-sized and easy to eat, they unintentionally created one of the most addictive fast food formats ever. Nashville hot chicken may have the most unexpected origin of all. According to widely told stories, it began as an act of revenge. A woman prepared an extremely spicy fried chicken to punish her unfaithful partner. Instead of rejecting it, he loved it, and the dish evolved into a defining specialty of Nashville. Across all of these examples, a consistent principle emerges. Many of the foods people consider iconic today were never designed for success. They were solutions to problems, responses to mistakes, or spontaneous experiments. And yet, those unplanned moments created flavors and formats that proved so effective, they reshaped entire segments of food culture. The popularity of many chicken dishes isn't just about ingredients, it's about how the brain processes flavor and texture in real time. Food scientists often refer to something called the bliss point, a precise balance of sweet, salty, and spicy that maximizes pleasure and keeps people coming back for more. Hot honey fried chicken is a perfect example. The sweetness hits the tongue first, creating a sense of comfort and familiarity. Then, just moments later, the heat from the chili arrives, activating a
Yo,
completely
these
different
wings are
sensory
legit.
response. By
For
the
real, the
time the
sauce is
brain
perfect.
registers the spice, it has already accepted the sweetness, making the
Still going
overall
for it.
experience far more compelling than either flavor alone.
Wait.
This delayed reaction creates a loop
Yeah,
that
these are the best
encourages
wings I've
continued
had.
eating
How long will it
almost
stay in the fire?
automatically.
2 minutes,
The
chef.
same principle applies to texture and portion size, especially with
Wings
foods
are
like
ready for
popcorn
pickup.
chicken.
An
Because each
astonishing
piece is
volume of
small,
product
it
moves
feels like a
through this
low
plant
commitment
daily.
bite.
A
You're not
stark
deciding to eat
contrast
a
to the
full
small
portion, you're
kitchens where
just
they are
reaching for
served.
one more piece.
The growth is
But that
staggering.
one more
From a
repeats
regional
over
snack in the
and over.
70s, wing
Behavioral
sales have
psychology
exploded
shows
into a
that bite-sized
multi-billion
foods
dollar
reduce
industry
the
today.
mental friction of
Let's go,
stopping,
defense.
making
Get
them
up.
significantly harder to resist. Combined with a crispy coating that delivers immediate sensory feedback,
You literally
popcorn
have
chicken
sauce on
becomes
your
less
nose.
about hunger and more about
I
habit.
can't help it. These are too
Across
good.
these examples, the key
Don't
insight
waste
is
it, man.
clear.
Eat it.
What makes food addictive isn't just what it's made of, but how it interacts with the brain's timing, perception, and decision-making processes. Many of the world's most recognizable chicken dishes are not just recipes, they are records of survival, migration, and cultural exchange. Jerk chicken, for instance, was developed by the Maroons in Jamaica, communities of formerly enslaved people who escaped into the mountains
These
to
are the
avoid
leftover
capture.
pieces, the ones
They
that
cooked their
don't
food
fit the standard
underground to
cuts.
hide smoke and
So what
scent,
exactly are we
using
supposed to
bold
do with all
spices
this
like
utilization they
allspice
do?
and Scotch bonnet peppers, not just for flavor, but as part of a strategy to stay alive. What is now celebrated globally as Jamaican cuisine began as a method of survival under extreme conditions. Southern fried chicken in the United States tells a similarly layered story. It emerged from the intersection of
Oh
Scottish
man, I've
immigrants
waited
who
all week
brought the
for this.
technique of frying chicken in fat and West African enslaved people who introduced complex seasoning and marination practices. Neither tradition alone created what we now recognize as Southern fried chicken. It was the fusion, shaped by forced migration and cultural adaptation, that defined it. Korean fried chicken adds another dimension to this pattern. During the Korean War, American soldiers introduced Southern-style fried chicken to South Korea. Local cooks adapted the method, refining it with techniques like double frying and incorporating Korean flavors such as soy, garlic, and gochujang. Over time, it evolved into a distinct culinary identity. Across all three examples, the pattern is clear. Food is never isolated. It moves with people, shaped by conflict, necessity, and exchange. What we eat today is deeply tied to where people have been and what they've endured. Food doesn't stay the same as it moves across borders. It gets reinterpreted, refined, and sometimes completely reinvented. Japan's karaage is a clear example of this process. Inspired by American fried chicken, Japanese cooks broke it down into smaller pieces, marinated it in soy sauce, ginger, and sake, and coated it with potato starch instead of flour. The result is lighter, crispier, and more precise in texture. So precise, in fact, that Japan established organizations like the Karaage Association to promote standards and celebrate quality. What began as an imported idea became something distinctly Japanese, shaped by local taste and attention to detail. A similar transformation happened with schnitzel. Originally from Austria and later popularized in Germany, it was brought to Australia and turned into something entirely different, the parma. Australians added tomato sauce and melted cheese on top, then built an entire pub culture around it. Today, people in Australia debate the correct version of a dish that didn't originate there at all, with a level of intensity usually reserved for national traditions. These examples highlight a consistent pattern. Dishes are not fixed objects with permanent definitions. They are flexible frameworks that adapt to local preferences, ingredients, and cultural habits. As food travels, it is rewritten sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, until it reflects the identity of the place that adopts it. In modern food culture, it's not necessarily the dish itself that determines success, it's how that dish is scaled, branded, and distributed. Chick-fil-A is one of the clearest examples. The company closes every Sunday, willingly giving up an entire day of revenue for religious reasons, yet it consistently generates more revenue per location than competitors that operate 7 days a week. Its flagship product is remarkably simple: a fried chicken sandwich with just 2 pickles on a buttered bun. There is nothing complex about it. But the consistency, service model, and brand identity elevate it beyond the product itself. Popeyes demonstrated a different kind of power. When it launched its chicken sandwich in 2019, demand surged so quickly that locations across the United States sold out within weeks. The hype escalated into what the media called the chicken sandwich wars, with rival chains scrambling to release competing versions. In one extreme case, a dispute over the sandwich even led to violence, highlighting how a fast food item can transcend food and become a cultural flashpoint. KFC represents the most scalable model of all. It did not invent fried chicken, but it perfected a system to produce it quickly, consistently, and at global scale. Through pressure frying, standardized seasoning, and aggressive franchising, KFC transformed a regional cooking method into a worldwide industry. The underlying pattern is clear. Success in food is rarely about originality alone. It is about building systems that deliver the same experience repeatedly, combined with branding strong enough to turn a simple product into a global phenomenon. When it comes to fried chicken, the difference between good and unforgettable often comes down to technique rather than ingredients. Buttermilk fried chicken is a clear example. The chicken is soaked in buttermilk for hours before frying, and that step changes everything. The mild acidity in the buttermilk breaks down muscle proteins, tenderizing the meat while allowing it to retain more moisture during cooking. At the same time, it helps the flour coating adhere better, creating a thicker, more textured crust. The result is chicken that is both juicier on the inside and more structured on the outside. Korean fried chicken takes a different technical approach with its signature double frying method. The first fry cooks the meat through, while the second fry, at a higher temperature, removes excess moisture from the coating. This creates a thin, glass-like crust that stays crisp far longer than traditional fried chicken. It's not about adding more ingredients, it's about controlling moisture and heat. Nashville hot chicken uses yet another technique to shape the eating experience. Instead of simply adding spice on top, it applies a paste made from cayenne, sugar, and hot frying oil directly onto the freshly cooked chicken. The residual heat from the oil activates the spices and drives them into the crust, creating a deep, lingering heat rather than a surface-level burn. Across all these styles, the pattern is consistent. The ingredients are relatively simple, but the methods are precise. What people remember is not just flavor, but texture, juiciness, and how the heat develops over time outcomes defined almost entirely by technique. Some of the most memorable dishes exist precisely because they don't make sense at first glance. Chicken and waffles is one of the clearest examples. On paper, it feels contradictory. Crispy, savory fried chicken paired with a soft, sweet waffle, often finished with maple syrup poured over everything. It combines flavors and textures that traditionally belong to completely different meals, dinner and breakfast, salt and sugar, crunch and softness. Logically, it shouldn't work. And yet, it does. The contrast is exactly what makes it compelling. The sweetness enhances the savory depth of the chicken, while the crisp texture creates balance against the softness of the waffle. Instead of clashing, the elements amplify each other. Part of its appeal also comes from surprise. When people try something that defies expectation but delivers satisfaction, it becomes more memorable than a dish that simply meets expectations. That sense of, this shouldn't work, but it does, creates a stronger emotional response and a lasting impression. Over time, what once seemed unusual becomes iconic, appearing everywhere from casual diners to high-end restaurants. The broader insight is simple but powerful. Innovation in food doesn't always come from refinement or logic. Sometimes, it comes from breaking the rules entirely and discovering that the result resonates even more because of it. Some dishes don't just spread, they transform into shared cultural behaviors that go far beyond the food itself. Buffalo wings are a clear example. What began as a local bar snack in Buffalo, New York stayed regional for years before expanding across the United States and eventually the world. Today, they are inseparable from social events like game days, especially the Super Bowl, where eating wings becomes part of the ritual, not just the menu. The food is no longer the focus, the experience around it is. KFC demonstrates this transformation even more dramatically. In Japan, a 1974 marketing campaign positioned KFC as a Christmas meal, something completely unrelated to its American origins. Over time, that campaign became tradition. Families now pre-order KFC weeks in advance every December, treating it as a seasonal ritual. The product didn't change, the meaning did. Korean fried chicken offers another version of this phenomenon. In South Korea, it's commonly paired with beer in a social setting known as chimaek, a combination so embedded in everyday life that it defines a specific type of gathering. It's not just about eating chicken, it's about how, when, and with whom it's consumed. Across these examples, the pattern is consistent. Food evolves into culture when it becomes tied to habits, rituals, and shared experiences. At that point, it stops being just something people eat and becomes something people do together. When you step back and look at all these dishes together, a clear message emerges. Great food is rarely the result of perfection, it is the result of adaptation. Many of the most iconic chicken dishes were not carefully engineered for success. They came from mistakes, constraints, survival, or simple experimentation. Yet what allowed them to endure was not luck alone, but how well they aligned with human behavior, how they satisfied the senses, fit into daily life, and evolved with culture. This leads to a deeper perspective. Success, whether in food or in life, is less about having the best idea and more about how well that idea adapts to real conditions. People often focus too much on getting things exactly right from the beginning, but the stories behind these dishes suggest the opposite. What matters is responsiveness, being able to recognize what works, refine it, and let it grow. Another important takeaway is the role of systems and consistency. Chick-fil-A, KFC, and other chains didn't win because their recipes were radically different. They won because they built systems that could deliver the same experience repeatedly at scale. In everyday life, this translates into the importance of habits and structure. Small actions, done consistently, often outperform occasional bursts of effort. Just as a well-designed cooking technique can transform a simple ingredient into something memorable, a well-designed routine can transform ordinary effort into meaningful results over time. There is also a lesson in understanding human psychology. The success of flavors like
The
hot
alluring
honey or
contrast of
formats like
sweet and
popcorn
spicy
chicken
triggers a
shows
primal
that how
response.
something is
This
experienced
is the
matters as much
psychology
as
of
what it
craving.
is. Timing, contrast, and ease all influence behavior. Applied to daily life, this suggests that if you want to build better habits, whether it's eating healthier, exercising, or working more effectively, you should design your environment to make the desired action easier and more rewarding. Reduce friction, create
Yes.
immediate positive feedback, and make the next step feel small. These principles are not abstract, they are the same mechanisms that make certain foods hard to stop eating. Culturally, these
Okay, the
dishes
stir
remind
fry
us
is
that
ready.
identity is not fixed.
Perfect. Right on
Food
top of the
evolves as it
gravity on
moves
top.
across regions, shaped
This is
by
gonna be
local
amazing.
preferences, history, and available resources. This reflects a broader truth. Growth often comes from exposure to different perspectives. Being open to reinterpretation of ideas, habits, or traditions can lead to outcomes that are richer and more meaningful
I
than
remember when
strict
we first tried to
adherence
make
to the
this
original
ourselves.
form.
Oh, don't remind
At
me.
the
It was a
same time,
disaster.
the emotional attachment people have to
But this
certain
turned out
dishes,
perfectly.
like family
You ready to go
recipes or
home
regional
and enjoy the
specialties,
fusion chicken?
highlights the importance of
Thank you.
continuity.
It smells
Not everything
incredible.
should change. Some things matter because they connect us to people, places, and memories. In practical terms, the solution is to balance these forces. Be flexible enough to
Here is your
adapt,
chicken
but
served.
grounded
Enjoy your
enough
meal.
to preserve
Oh,
what gives
thank you
meaning.
very much.
Focus
This is
less on
amazing.
perfection and more on iteration. Build systems that support
Oh my goodness.
consistency. Pay attention to how experiences are designed,
That actually
not just
worked
what
really
they
well.
contain. And most importantly, recognize that even small, unplanned moments can become something significant if they resonate with how people think, feel, and live.